Well, many people have a deep wish to not just build wealth, but to share it, making a difference in the lives of their family, maybe a charity or their church, whatever it might be. Now, to succeed in those efforts, it's important to avoid estate planning mistakes, and that's what we're unpacking during this portion of Retire Colorado with Alicia and Josh Lewis of the Lehman Lewis Financial Group. Reach out today, 970-446-1234. All right, let's talk through common blunders, and we've heard them, especially estate. I don't remember. I read this article. It was somebody in like South Carolina, and there was a husband and wife, and the wife passed before the husband. Well, she was a teacher, and when she started teaching, she was single. And so her beneficiary was her sister. And the sister really didn't care for the brother-in-law all that much. And the couple, they were married for 25 or 30 years, I think the article said. And lo and behold, when the wife passed away, guess who her beneficiary still was, because they had not planned? It was the sister, because she made that plan when she was single and they'd never revisited it. And guess what? The husband had no recourse, because what's on the document, who's your beneficiary, trumps all. And we've heard of these over the years. So let's talk about some common blunders that you've seen people come to you after they've made those blunders on their estate and legacy plan.
Yeah, I would say that's a big one, right? Just not updating those beneficiaries. I've heard similar stories of people getting divorced and then they leave their, ex-wife on the 401k because they got a different job, right? And they moved on, and then that money was sort of orphaned at the 401k plan. They never looked back. It's growing, it's invested, and then next thing you know, somebody dies unexpectedly, and then here she comes lurking from the shadows, cashing the check, So I think that's a huge part of it. And kind of like in the last segment, Alicia said, every 5 years you should revisit that in terms of your estate plan. When you think about it, like take a moment and think about everything that's happened. It's as a significant life change in the last 5 years, right? Did you have another grandchild? Did maybe one of your kids get divorced? Did, all of these things happen. And I think it's an easy thing to put off. And then next thing you know, there's going to be these assets out there that are going to the wrong person. And we've seen that play out, where maybe somebody cashed out a pension and they put it into an account and then they never tied a beneficiary to that. So I think just reviewing that, having that up to date, obviously, when things happen in life, maybe major medical events or something like that, we think about it more and more. But the fact of the matter is you want to make sure that stuff is accounted for prior to that happening. And we live in a crazy world where, accidents happen. There's all kinds of these things that go on over the course of the year that, could significantly change your life, and it would be totally unexpected. So just making sure you're revisiting that and reviewing that regardless of how old you are, right? Because that's another thing. I think people want to put it off. And I think that is a big blunder of like, oh, I'm young, I'm healthy, I don't need to worry about all of those things. Well, life can change pretty abruptly. So
I mean, I would say another big one would be putting the kids on the house, which I know I mentioned this earlier, but this is a big one where they're just like, oh, we want our kids to inherit the house. But that opens you up to some major liability. If something were to happen, whether it's divorce or an accident or something like that, but also from the tax perspective of, passing on that house from that stepped up basis. The other thing too, that we see quite a bit actually, and we always really hone in on this is, I think a lot of times people in this day and age, which I think is so cool, they're helping their kids out maybe by buying a house for them or buying the house and then letting they're the bank on it, right? And then the kids are paying them back. Having that documented and making sure that if there's other kids involved, just to kind of clear the air of like, here's how that looks from a beneficiary standpoint, to have it in writing so that everybody can see, hey, this is this is what we did. And so, the beneficiary arrangement over here might be a little less because if we die, they get to keep, they're not paying back the loan anymore because we're gone. So things like that, it's just the more communication and clarity, the better. And I think that that's where, again, then there's no argument with kids and it just doesn't turn into an ugly thing. It's just, hey, look at how great they set this up. And it saves a lot of heartache and, a lot of fights too.
Yeah, I know, my dad's passed but I know my mom and dad, it was, everybody's going to get, my mom was like to the dime. It'll be, everybody gets the same, right? That's how they wanted it set up. But I know she's very meticulous about that. And so that's what you want to be, folks. In fact, a recent survey, Alicia, says that only 26% of Americans have actually taken steps to formulate an estate plan. So if you're a part of that 76, understand you're in pretty good company, but understand, get off your tuchus and start doing something. And because again, those with a financial professional in their life, and if you're with the Lehman Lewis Financial Group, we know that you have this covered. But you're twice as likely to already have that completed estate plan. So explain just why working with you and your team really helps expedite this process. And you can check it off your list and feel like, okay, I really have a plan.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole purpose, right? Is to make sure that you have a plan, but we're looking at it from the retirement aspect, right? Because I think when you're 20 years old, it's kind of easier to like, oh, whatever, I'm 20, I'm going to live forever. But when you're in retirement, yeah. So you're in a different season and planning for retirement is much, much different than planning when you're 20, 30, 40 years old. And, which is why we specifically put together retirement plans that is all encompassing everything retirement, right? Investments, income, taxes, healthcare, and legacy, but all of that, of course, around what do you want your dream retirement to look like. And that's what we plan it around. But legacy is that big piece too. And I think, as we sit down with people, it is more top of mind because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going into this new chapter of life. And as much as a lot of people will always feel like a spring chicken, always feel like they're in their, 20s or 30s at the end of the day. And I, just to poke fun of my dad a little bit, he's always just like, I still feel like I'm 21 years old, and he's like, and then I look in the mirror and I'm like, whoa, I'm not 20. And I think that's across the board. Everybody just still feels young and, like they're going to live a long time. And so I can put that on the back burner, but that's our job to make sure that everything is in place, because when something does happen, I can't tell you how many times our clients are like, some of the conversations you had with us were really hard and things that I didn't like to work through and walk through and talk about, nobody wants to talk about this is what happens when I'm dead, right? Nobody. But at the end of the day, people thank us, like, thank you so much for pushing us through that because we didn't want to do it. And it was just kind of a dreadful conversation, but man, I'm glad we did because now, a lot of people die by surprise. It's not always this, where you can plan it a little bit more. And when that happens, it is so crucial to have all of that put into place, in a proper way. And so that's what we do. And, it's an honor to do it. And sometimes it is hard conversations, but, sometimes it's, fun conversations too of like, how cool is this that you get to plan this because you've done so well and now you get to bless your kids or bless, whatever organization that, but let's make sure that you get to choose who that goes to and it doesn't get more into other people's hands like the IRS or probate or, any of that. So, my grandma was really, she was very, very in depth of how she wanted things left, even down. She had a bunch of really beautiful clocks, like grandfather clocks and, wall clocks. Just all kinds of clocks. And she had written, each person who she wanted the specific clock to go to, she wrote on the back of the clock, which was adorable, right? I mean, once I was an adult, I was like, let's go ahead and put that in writing, because she literally had a sticky note on the back of the clock. And I was like, that's sweet. And there was no fights or anything, but I thought that was really sweet, but also that doesn't always do it, right? Like, we want to make sure that things are in writing. There is clarity.
Yeah, no doubt. My wife's grandfather did that. He made a bunch of trunks, especially for the granddaughters. It was kind of like, again, a trunk that you'd keep your different fun treasures in, and again had written on the back who was going to get each one of those. So yeah,
I love that.
Josh, let's talk about, and we've got about 2 minutes left in this segment. Alicia talked about when we don't have that plan, and I mentioned it at the end of the last segment about taxes can really punch you in the face if you don't have some things there. But just think through, those, you want your wishes met, you want assets preserved. I don't know anybody that's raising their hand and says, yeah, let's give a bunch of money to the government, not to my loved ones.
Yeah. And I don't see those people either. So maybe they're out there, maybe they're not. But I think just making sure, that all of those things reflect where you want them to go. Last week, I met with some clients. We met with their estate planning attorney. So you always want to work with somebody who's qualified, right? Like an estate planning attorney. We're not.
And you have some that you can recommend if they don't come with one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with a couple different ones. But we just sat through, we were all on a Zoom call. We went through all of their assets. We checked beneficiaries. They're in the middle of, some significant life changes. So we're just going back through everything, making sure that, hey, all of these beneficiaries are up to date. We've got the proper titling on accounts with their trusts and all of those things. So, it was all of 45 minutes, but it definitely just put some context to where their assets were going to go, when they were going to go to said people, because some of them are going to minors, right? And you don't want to give a minor all of that money, maybe when they're super young, to protect them from themselves. So just having those conversations, working with other trusted professionals to make sure that, hey, we're addressing all of these things that, pertain to how your assets are going to be divided up after you pass away. So just making sure that all the boxes are checked and that everything's in good order. So, just making sure that, hey, we've addressed these things and we've talked through them. And then we're going to probably rinse and repeat in a couple more years to make sure that nothing's changed in their life. And we, don't want to make any changes to be reflected in the estate plan. So, do it early, do it often.
So, folks, if you think you have an estate plan, you want it reviewed, Alicia and Josh can do that as part of their 5-part process of your retirement income plan. And if you don't have a plan, it behooves you to get one. Reach out today, 970-446-1234. More Retire Colorado straight ahead.